Hey friends, before the story begins, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that whenever we bring a new story, you get it first. If you have trouble sleeping or your mind feels restless, then this story is especially for you. So let's begin. The galaxy had many empires, but none carried a darker reputation than the Velithar Empire. Across star maps and war journals, their worlds were marked with deep red symbols, warnings to any traveler who valued their life. Even the bravest captains avoided their territory, for they knew the stories of what lived at its center. At the heart of this empire ruled a single being known only as the Queen. No other name was used. No other title was needed. She was the strongest of her species, the oldest mind in their bloodline, and the reason the Velithar Empire spread across so many systems. Her presence alone made armies kneel and rulers hesitate. The Velithar were a strange and powerful species, tall, armored, fast, and shaped by endless war. Their bodies glowed with hard, glass-like plates. Their movements were sharp and quiet. Their eyes shone in ultraviolet colors that humans could barely see. Most frightening of all, the Velithar carried natural psychic force. Even a calm Velithar warrior could make weaker species feel fear by simply standing near them. But the Queen was different. Her power was so strong that even her own people avoided looking at her directly. To them, she was a storm in living form. Her mind pressed down on anyone near her, reminding them that she could break them without lifting a hand. Yet she did not rule through cruelty. She ruled through strength, silence, and the weight of endless expectations. It was this ruler and this feared empire that the humans were about to meet. The Galactic Union had arranged a diplomatic mission, hoping to avoid future conflict with the Velithar. Many governments believed the meeting was hopeless, but the Union still sent a small delegation. Among the scientists and ambassadors was a woman named Helena Ward. She was quiet, intelligent, and brave, known for her calm nature in stressful situations. She was also a mother. And because her husband fell ill just days before the mission, she was forced to bring her 6-year-old son, Milo, with her. No one expected that child to change the fate of two civilizations. The journey to the Velithar homeworld, Archajal, took 3 days through unstable hyperspace lanes. The crew felt a heavy weight in their hearts as the ship approached the planet. Archajal was unlike any world humans had seen. Its surface was covered in black crystal mountains and glowing rivers of energy that flowed like living light. Violent storms crackled across the sky, and giant winged shadows circled the clouds. As the ship entered the atmosphere, the human crew saw the capital city, a towering dark structure that rose from the ground like a massive obsidian tree. It spiraled upward, its roots spreading into the earth and its branches piercing the clouds. Every part of it seemed alive, pulsing with quiet energy. Inside the ship, Milo pressed his small face against the window. His eyes were wide with wonder. Everything was new, strange, and exciting to him. Helena placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, trying to keep him close, but she could see his curiosity glowing stronger than his fear. She worried what problems that curiosity might cause on this mission. The ship landed on a wide platform surrounded by tall Velithar guards. They stood perfectly still, their armor shining like cut stone, their heads slightly bowed. Even from a distance, the humans felt the pressure of their presence, heavy, cold, and powerful. As the human delegation stepped out, Milo stayed close to Helena. The air around them hummed softly, as if the entire planet was breathing. Strange blue lights drifted through the air, and every sound echoed like it came from deep inside a cave. The Velithar escorts led the humans into the great palace. Its halls were enormous, shaped like the inside of a giant creature's ribcage. Glowing symbols covered the walls, and strange vines with tiny sparks of light grew between the stone plates. The deeper they walked, the stronger the psychic pressure became. It felt like a storm cloud was hanging above their heads. The Queen sensed their arrival long before they entered her chamber. She sat upon her throne, which was carved from the living shell of a giant ancient beast. Around her, the air shimmered like heat waves rising from a desert. She was taller than any human, with armor that shifted colors like a slow-burning fire. Her presence filled the entire hall with a quiet weight, as if the room itself was holding its breath. She did not need to speak to show her power. She only sat still, and the message was clear. She was the center of her world, and nothing could challenge her. When the humans entered the throne hall, Even the bravest among them felt their legs weaken. The hall was enormous and silent. Long pillars rose to the ceiling like dark spears, and the floor reflected the queen's glowing form like a mirror. The Velithar guards lined the sides of the hall, heads bowed, eyes lowered. No one dared to look directly at the queen, not even her own people. Helena felt her breath catch in her throat. The queen's presence was overwhelming, almost crushing. She kept Milo behind her, trying to shield him from the psychic force. But the boy leaned to the side, peeking at the towering figure on the throne with innocent curiosity. The meeting followed strict Velithar tradition. There were no speeches, only slow gestures and respectful movements. The humans tried to copy these motions, hoping not to offend their hosts. But then something unexpected happened. During a quiet moment between ceremonial steps, Milo slipped out from behind his mother. He walked across the cold floor, his tiny shoes echoing in the massive hall. At first, Helena did not notice. When she realized he was gone, her heart nearly stopped. She froze in fear, afraid that moving too suddenly might trigger a dangerous reaction from the guards. Every Velithar in the hall stiffened. Their bodies turned rigid, their eyes widening in shock. A human child had just broken every rule of their sacred space. And he walked straight toward the queen. She watched him approach with stillness sharper than any blade. No one had ever dared to move so close to her without permission. Milo reached the base of the throne. He looked up at the queen, whose glowing armor sent shifting colors across the polished floor. To him, she didn't seem frightening. She seemed sad, like someone who carried a heavy weight for too long. In a simple, innocent motion, Milo stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her massive leg. The hall became silent in an instant. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The queen had not been touched by anyone for decades. Her own people were too afraid. Her power isolated her. But now, a small human child held her with complete trust. For a moment, something in the queen changed. Her psychic pressure softened. The glow in her armor dimmed and warmed. She slowly lowered her head, studying the child who hugged her as if she were not a monster, not a ruler, but someone who needed comfort. And so, in that silent hall, witnessed by warriors and diplomats, something impossible happened. The queen allowed the child to stay near her. Nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The throne hall stayed frozen in silence long after Milo hugged the queen. Not a single guard dared to move, and not a single member of the human delegation dared to breathe. It felt as if the entire palace, and maybe even the entire planet, had been caught in a moment too impossible to understand. Yet the queen did not crush the child. She did not push him away. She did not even rise from her throne. Instead, she lowered her head, almost as if she were studying a strange miracle. Her glowing armor dimmed from sharp violet to a softer, warmer gold. Her psychic pressure, once heavy like a mountain, softened until it felt no stronger than a calm breeze. For the Velithar, this was beyond shocking. Their queen had never shown gentleness. She was respected because she was unbreakable, untouched, and untouched by choice. Even her closest advisors never approached closer than 10 steps. And now, a small human child stood pressed against her leg, holding her without fear. Something inside the queen stirred, something old, something she had buried deep, long ago before the endless wars. Before she became a symbol of duty and strength, she had not been alone. The queen once had a daughter, small, clever, curious, and full of questions about the stars. The child used to climb her throne, poke her armored chest, and laugh at the glowing patterns on her shell. The queen had been strict, but the child always smiled as if no rule could stop her. That memory had been sealed away after tragedy struck. Her daughter was lost in a war that reshaped the entire Velithar Empire. After that day, the queen no longer allowed anyone close. She ruled with strength so absolute that even her own people forgot she once knew softness. But now, with Milo's small arms around her leg, the memory returned sharp and clear. The hall trembled with that forgotten emotion. Helena watched in silent terror, her heart pounding so loudly she thought the queen might hear it. She wanted to run forward and grab her son, but she knew one wrong move could end everything. So she stood frozen, hands shaking, praying that the queen would not react with violence. Milo, however, felt none of this fear. He simply held on, as though the queen was not the most dangerous being in the galaxy, but a tall, lonely figure who needed a friend. The queen slowly extended one massive armored hand. It moved through the air like a rising comet, slow, controlled, full of silent power. The Velithar guards tensed, ready to react, but the queen's mind sent a single wordless warning that froze them in place. Her hand reached Milo's small back, not touching yet, only hovering a few inches above him. She hesitated, something she had never done in her long reign. For the first time in many years, the queen felt unsure. Finally, she let her hand rest gently on the child's back. Her armor shifted to a faint golden glow, calm and warm. Something inside her cracked open, like ice melting after a long winter. The Velithar guards exchanged silent looks of disbelief. To them, this moment felt like watching a mountain bow or seeing a star dim. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. Yet they could not deny what they were witnessing. Milo slowly pulled back and looked up at the queen. He smiled, innocent and bright. The queen did not understand human expressions, but she recognized the feeling behind it. A simple warmth. A simple trust. No fear. For centuries, everyone had feared her, even her own kind. Yet this human child felt nothing but kindness toward her. The queen wondered how a small creature from such a young species could stand before her without trembling. She lifted Milo with surprising gentleness, raising him so their eyes could meet. Milo laughed softly as she lifted him higher. His small fingers touched the glowing patterns on her armor, tracing lines without hesitation. This simple touch sent a ripple of psychic energy through the hall. Something ancient inside the queen responded to the child's presence. Her mind softened, releasing a wave of calm energy. For the first time in years, her throne hall felt peaceful instead of heavy. The human delegation saw this and were struck with awe. They were witnessing history, something no one would believe unless they saw it with their own eyes. The Velithar guards lowered their heads even further, shocked by the queen's acceptance. Some trembled, unsure what this meant for their empire. Others refused to look, convinced this moment was too sacred to witness directly. The queen held Milo carefully, as if holding something precious and fragile. She stood from her throne, moving with slow, graceful strength. The hall shook slightly under her steps, but she kept the child steady in her arms. As she walked forward, Helena finally found the courage to move. She stepped closer, her breath shaking, ready to receive her son. But when she looked at the queen's face, she saw no anger, no danger, only something deep and unreadable, something that had not been seen in the queen for a very long time. The queen lowered Milo back onto the floor. He ran immediately to his mother, who hugged him tightly, her body shaking with relief. But the queen did not turn away. She studied Helena, sensing the fear and love twisting inside her heart. She sensed the human mother's instinct to protect, the silent desperation, the overwhelming relief at seeing her child safe. Humans had many weaknesses. They were small, fragile, emotional, and short-lived. But their greatest strength, something no Velithar fully understood, was their capacity for attachment. The queen saw something familiar in Helena's protective embrace, something she had once known but forced herself to forget. The instinct of a parent. A long silence filled the hall. The queen's glowing armor pulsed with slow, soft light. She looked down at her hands, still warm from holding the child. The memory of her own daughter pressed against her mind like a gentle voice calling from the past. For a moment, the queen, ruler of the most feared empire in the galaxy, felt fragile. But fragility was not weakness, it was the first sign of change. Around her, the Velithar guards began to kneel, not out of fear but out of respect. For the first time, respect mixed with something new, hope. The queen stepped back to her throne, but her presence had changed. Her psychic aura felt lighter, less crushing. The hall no longer felt like a place of judgment, but a place holding its breath for something new. The humans sensed it too. The queen had not just accepted the child's touch, she had allowed herself to feel something she had denied for years. And once a ruler opens the door to emotion, something powerful always follows. As the meeting ended and the humans were escorted out, one thing was clear. A new future had begun in the Velithar Empire, and it started with a single child's simple hug. News traveled fast inside the Velithar Empire. even when no one dared to speak it out loud. The moment the queen lifted the human child in her arms, a wave of psychic echoes spread through the palace like ripples on a dark ocean. These echoes moved far beyond the throne hall, carrying confusion, shock, and something much deeper. Something no Valithar had felt in centuries. Back inside the throne hall, the queen sat alone, her massive form glowing softly as she relived the moment Milo touched her. She felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since her daughter died. She felt the weight of memory, the tiny hands that once held her armor, the innocent laughter that filled her chambers, the warm presence she lost long ago. This memory did not weaken her, it awakened her. For the first time in centuries, she allowed herself to truly breathe. Her armor shifted with gentle light, each color pulse revealing a moment of remembrance. Her throne felt less like a prison and more like a place where she could finally think clearly. Yet she also sensed something else, danger. Not danger toward the humans, but danger from within her own empire. There were factions among the Valithar who believed emotions were weakness. They believed the queen's strength came from her cold discipline. These factions would not accept change. They would not accept softness. And they would not accept the idea that a human child, one of the weakest species in the galaxy, could influence the queen's heart. The queen felt their minds stirring in distant corners of her empire. Their thoughts were filled with fear, anger, and disbelief. They did not understand the nature of her change. They did not understand the value of the child's bravery. Some of them began planning. Some of them began gathering supporters. And some of them dangerously began to whisper that the queen had been compromised. The queen felt every whisper, every doubt, every sharp thought that cut like a blade. She did not react, but she understood what would come. Her people were strong, loyal, and disciplined. But loyalty became fragile when fear entered the mind, and right now the Valithar were afraid. She needed to make a decision. Not just for the humans, not just for Milo, but for the future of her entire empire. Her heart had awakened, but an awakened heart also invited danger. She knew this path would lead to conflict, but she also knew she could not return to the cold emptiness she once lived in. Far away, Helena watched Milo sleep in their chamber. She brushed his hair gently, grateful that he had survived the encounter, but she also felt fear. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if the queen's acceptance would protect them, or if it had painted a target on their backs. The Valithar were powerful, unpredictable, and shaped by ancient traditions. Any small mistake could turn diplomacy into disaster. But as she looked at Milo, she felt something deeper: pride. Her son acted not with fear, but with heart. He saw the queen not as a monster, but as someone who needed kindness, something humans sometimes understood better than any other species. Back in the throne room, the queen stood and stepped forward. Her footsteps echoed through the hall like distant thunder. She no longer walked with the same sharp, cold aura. Her presence was still powerful, but the pressure had shifted. It was no longer a storm, it was a sunrise. She reached a massive balcony overlooking her empire. Below her, the city stretched across the landscape like a forest of dark crystal spires. The air shimmered with psychic energy. Her people could sense her emotions from afar. She allowed them to feel her fully. The fear, the memory, the warmth, the change. For the first time in her long reign, the queen shared her heart with her people. Not as a ruler, but as someone who once lost something precious and finally found a reason to open the door again. The psychic wave spread across the entire capital. Some Valithar fell to their knees in awe. Others trembled in confusion. A few hardened factions responded with anger, their minds dark with resistance. But all of them understood one thing: the queen had changed. And when a ruler like her changes, the entire empire changes with her. Far below, in their private chamber, Milo stirred in his sleep. He felt the wave too, not as a psychic message, but as a warm sensation spreading across his small heart. He smiled, unaware that he had just awakened a force powerful enough to reshape the galaxy. The queen turned away from the balcony. She knew what had to come next. The humans could not leave the planet yet. Not until she understood why the child had touched her heart. Not until she understood what it awakened. And not until she faced the growing threat rising within her own empire. A storm was coming, but not the kind the Velithar were used to. This time it would be a battle between fear and hope. And the Queen had already The alien capital remained silent for a long time after the Queen shouted her order to clear the palace. Her voice had carried a storm, but inside her own chest she felt something far stranger than anger. She felt fear, not of an enemy, not of a threat, but of a tiny human child who had walked into her arms without hesitation. The Queen stood alone in the enormous crystal hall. The pillars glowed with pale blue light, but the air felt heavy. Her people had left in a rush, still trembling from the sight of the human child resting against her. No one dared question her decision. No one dared ask why she allowed it, and most importantly, no one dared look her in the eye as they exited. The Queen, feared across 16 star systems, now stood unsure of her own hands. They still tingled from the warmth of the child's hug. Human warmth. A warmth she had never felt from her own species. Her people were cold-blooded by nature, ancient warriors built for conquest, not affection. Their bodies survived harsh environments, but their hearts had never learned softness. Yet one small human had crossed a battlefield, ignored every warning, and wrapped his arms around her as if she were someone who needed comfort. The thought unsettled her, because in some deep and hidden part of herself she realized she did need it. Outside the palace walls, the city buzzed with terrified whispers. Soldiers patrolled the streets with confusion in their eyes. The image of their untouchable queen holding a human child spread like wildfire. Some feared it was a trap. Some believed the child carried human mind control abilities. Others whispered that the queen had finally chosen a weakness, and the galaxy would smell it like blood in water. But not a single one understood what had truly happened inside that hall. The Queen moved slowly toward the balcony overlooking her kingdom. Far below, millions of her soldiers trained, drilled, and prepared for war against humanity. For generations, her species had believed humans were unpredictable, emotional, and dangerously resilient. Humans did not break easily. They adapted too fast. They loved too fiercely. They fought with a desperation unmatched in the galaxy. And love, her people believed, was a flaw. Humans wielded it like a weapon. The Queen watched the distant training fields and wondered if her people had been wrong. Because the only creature who had ever dared touch her without trembling had been human, and he had done it out of pure trust, not arrogance. She looked down at her arm. The child had left a faint mark of dried tears on the dark scales near her shoulder. It was such a small thing, yet her mind could not forget the warmth of it. She needed answers, not guesses, not fear, so she walked deeper into her palace, into a restricted wing where her historians kept ancient knowledge older than most civilizations. The hall was filled with stone tablets, floating data spheres, and preserved relics from lost worlds. The Queen approached a massive organic archive, a living organism that stored memories of rulers before her. It awakened as she touched its surface. The archive's pulsing glow reflected across her sharp features as she searched through centuries of recorded encounters between her race and humanity. There were battles, broken treaties, destroyed planets, and countless failed negotiations. Yet something strange became clear as she read deeper. Every moment of peace, every attempt at cooperation was started by humans. Her own species had never offered a single gesture of trust. The Queen closed her eyes. For the first time, she felt the weight of her ancestors pressing down like an unseen shadow. They had taught her that humans were dangerous because they were unpredictable. But perhaps it was her people who had been trapped in predictability, blind, rigid, unable to evolve. Unable. The human child had not been predictable. He had been something else entirely. The Queen left the archive with a heavy silence inside her mind. Night fell across the city, turning the sky a deep shade of violet. Far above the palace, warships patrolled like metal predators waiting for orders. The Queen's generals expected her to declare readiness for a devastating attack on humanity within days. They believed she would lead them into battle with her usual fury, but everything inside her had changed in the moment the child hugged her. She returned to the grand hall. It felt different now, less like a throne room and more like the memory of something sacred. She walked toward the center where the child had stood. Her claws pressed lightly against the spot where the boy's tiny feet had rested. Her heart beat once, twice, slow, uneasy, as if unsure how to feel. Then she lifted her head. She sensed movement behind one of the carved pillars. It was the child. He had slipped back inside without fear, as if the palace were not a fortress but a playground. His small body carried no weapon. His eyes held no fear of the towering queen. He simply stared up at her with quiet curiosity. The queen felt her breath hitch. She had faced death, war, and assassins without blinking, but the presence of this little human pulled something raw and instinctive from deep within her. She stepped toward the child slowly, as if approaching a fragile creature. The hall was so silent she could hear her own breathing echo. Her mind whispered warnings about weakness, reputation, tradition, but her heart whispered something else. The child reached out a hand toward her, tiny and gentle. She froze. A queen who had conquered entire worlds froze before a small human child. But before she could understand what the moment meant, a distant explosion echoed across the city. The hall trembled. Light flickered. Soldiers shouted outside. The queen snapped her gaze toward the balcony as alarms roared throughout the capital. Human ships had arrived. War had come. And the queen now stood in the center of it, holding the one creature who might be able to stop it. The first blast shook the foundation of the palace like a wounded beast. Walls trembled, crystal pillars rippled with unstable light. Outside, the sky transformed into a battlefield, a violent mix of burning metal, flashing engines, and distant thunder from starship cannons. The queen stood completely still, her instincts forged from a lifetime of war. Yet her focus did not go to the ships, the alarms, or the soldiers running in panic. Her eyes locked on the human child standing at her feet, his small hands clutching the edge of her dark armor. The city roared with chaos. Her people looked up in terror as human ships descended like burning stars. The queen knew those vessels, fast, agile, built with an engineering style only humans could create. They weren't here to invade. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to retrieve the child. The queen felt a cold realization wash over her. She had expected her generals to misinterpret the human boy as a threat. She had expected her people to panic. But she had not expected humanity to react with the same intensity, launching a rescue fleet the moment they sensed danger to one of their young. Humans protected their children with a wild, unstoppable force. Her people feared weakness. Humans turned weakness into strength. Another explosion lit the sky in blinding white. A shockwave rolled through the palace gates, knocking statues to the ground and sending guards scrambling to regain control. The queen lifted the child instinctively, shielding him with her massive body. She didn't understand the emotion driving her, but she could not let harm touch him. Outside, her commanders screamed orders into communication lines. Soldiers scrambled into defensive positions. The entire capital lit up with energy shields as the alien species prepared for a battle they never truly wanted. The queen walked to the highest balcony, carrying the boy in her arms. The wind whipped her cloak around her as she stared at the incoming fleet. Dozens of human destroyers forming a protective perimeter around a central flagship. That flagship alone dwarfed her palace. Humanity had come prepared for total war. But war was not what she wanted, not anymore. The queen raised her head, sensing her generals gathering behind her. They were terrified not of the humans, but of the decision she might make. Her people had waited centuries for her leadership, for her strength, for her fearlessness. And now they watched her closely, unsure whether she would unleash destruction or hold her hand. She scanned the sky again. The human fleet was not firing at the city. Their weapons were aimed only at her planet's orbital defense systems. Strategic strikes meant to disable, not annihilate. Humans were not here to destroy, they were here to... The child tugged gently at her armor, his eyes wide but unafraid. He didn't cry. He didn't shake. He simply watched the sky as if he knew his people were coming. The queen lowered her gaze to him. For a moment, the world around her faded. The shouting soldiers, the falling debris, the sirens, all of it became distant noise. She thought of her ancestors' warnings. Humans are unstable. Humans act on emotion. Humans cannot be reasoned with. But what if the truth was different? What if humans were dangerous because they cared too deeply? What if that was the power her people had always been missing? Behind her, a general stepped forward. She didn't need to hear his words to know what he wanted. Permission to fire. Her people had never backed down from a fight. They would rather die than appear weak. The queen pressed her clawed hand against the balcony rail. The metal groaned under her strength. She felt the eyes of 1,000 soldiers fixed on her, waiting, scared. But she did not give the order to attack. Instead, she carried the child into the heart of the palace toward the grand communication chamber. The room glowed with the dim, steady heartbeat of ancient technology, walls pulsing like veins, pillars responding to her presence. From the center of the room, a massive holographic sphere flickered to life, linked to every major ship approaching her world. She placed the child beside her, keeping one protective arm around him. Then she opened a channel. The hologram flared, showing the bridge of the human flagship. Commanders stood alert. Marines were strapped into exosuits. Pilots waited for orders. But the center figure, the Supreme Admiral, stood completely still when he saw what the Queen held in her arms. The entire bridge fell silent. In that moment, worlds collided with nothing but raw, unspoken understanding. The Queen did not speak words. She used her presence alone, her stance, her open hands, her gentle hold on the child, to communicate what her species had never dared show. She meant no harm. Outside, the sky still burned with the tension of war, but for a brief moment the firing stopped. Human ships held position, engines dimming. Her own planet's guns lowered. Two civilizations hovered on the edge of peace or destruction. The Queen lifted the child higher, letting the light fall across his face. She let the humans see that he was unharmed, that he was safe, that the deadliest being of her species had chosen not to destroy but to protect. Across the hologram, the humans reacted with visible shock. Admirals exchanged worried glances. There was no fear of the Queen herself, only fear of misunderstandings, of mistakes that could ignite extinction-level war. But they saw the truth. The Queen felt their hesitation soften, and for the first time in her life, she felt the beginning of trust. Suddenly, the palace shook again. This time not from human fire, but from her own people's weapons. The Queen stiffened as she sensed betrayal. Somewhere in the city, a rogue faction of her soldiers had ignored her silence. They believed the Queen had grown weak. They believed humanity must be crushed instantly. They launched a surprise attack straight toward the human fleet. The Queen's heart dropped. The humans had shown restraint. The humans had shown trust. Her own people had answered with aggression. The sky lit up as missiles streaked upward like burning arrows. And in that terrible second, the Queen realized that everything she had tried to protect, peace, trust, and the small human child in her arms, was about to be destroyed. Unless she stopped the war herself, the missiles streaked upward like burning scars across the violet sky, leaving trails of smoke behind them. For a moment, the world held its breath. Human ships froze in shock. The alien Queen soldiers stared in horror at what their own rogue faction had unleashed. And deep within the palace, the Queen stood perfectly still, her body tense, her mind clear. The human child pressed against her chest, sensing danger even if he could not understand it. His small fingers gripped her armor with silent fear. She could feel his heartbeat like a fragile drum beneath her touch. In that instant, everything became painfully simple. If the missiles reached the human fleet, war would begin. Not a small conflict, not a limited strike, but a galaxy-wide catastrophe. Her world, her people, her future, everything would burn. And humanity, a species that protected its children above everything else, would unleash its full fury without hesitation. The Queen did not have the luxury of time. She did not have the option of negotiation. She had one choice: to act. The floor beneath her trembled, but she moved with unnatural speed. She lifted the child, holding him securely, and raced through the palace corridors, her scaled feet pounding against stone. Guards watched her pass with stunned expressions. They had never seen their Queen run, not out of fear, not out of urgency, not out of anything. Yet now she moved faster than any warrior in her empire's history. She reached an ancient chamber, hidden beneath the palace, known only to rulers. The doors opened at her genetic command, revealing a forgotten technology. A planetary override system, older than any war, older than even her own lineage. It connected directly to every weapon on the planet, every defense array, every orbital cannon. Only the Queen could use it, and she had never needed to until this moment. She placed the human child gently on a stone platform where he watched her with wide, trusting eyes. The ancient console reacted to her touch, glowing with powerful, living light. She felt the entire planet's weapons lock into her command. The rogue missiles were still climbing. She could almost hear the hum of their engines, taste the heat they left in the atmosphere. Her claws pressed against the final override. Her heart beat once slowly, painfully. Then she deactivated every single weapon on her world. A blinding wave of blue light flashed across the sky. Every active missile dissolved mid-flight into harmless particles. Orbital cannons powered down. Defense grids flickered and collapsed. The rogue battalion's launchers shut off, locking themselves. The entire world went quiet. Human ships hovered above the atmosphere, shocked and uncertain. They waited for retaliation. They waited for betrayal. But nothing came. The Queen had just disarmed her entire planet in front of an enemy fleet. Her own soldiers panicked. Some screamed that she had gone mad. Some begged her to restore defenses. Some fell silent, realizing her decision meant something far bigger than any one of them could understand. The Queen walked back to the palace balcony with the child in her arms. Her people stared up at her, not with respect, not with fear, but with confusion. They had always known their queen as a weapon, a destroyer, a conqueror, someone colder than the vacuum of space. But now they saw something different. A ruler who cherished life, a ruler who chose trust over fear, a ruler who held a human child as if he were her own. She stood tall, her silhouette outlined by the fading light of a broken sky. She was the first of her lineage to stop a war, not through power, but through something far more dangerous. Compassion. The humans opened a channel again. The Queen watched the hologram flicker to life. This time, the human commanders didn't stand in combat stances. Their helmets were off. Their weapons hung unused. The Supreme Admiral looked exhausted, as if he had been prepared to lose entire worlds if it meant saving one child. They saw the Queen holding the boy, unharmed, safe, protected. They understood. And so did her own people. For the first time in recorded history, the humans lowered their warship weapons first. Engines dimmed. Cannons turned away. Shields retracted. The fleet drifted in the sky like peaceful giants waiting for her final decision. The Queen stepped forward, allowing the child to raise his hand toward his people. The gesture was small, innocent, but it carried the weight of entire civilizations. When the humans saw the child wave, they reacted instantly. Relief washed across every face, every soldier, every commander. A single child had lived. A galaxy-wide war had been avoided. And the Queen felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. She had been feared all her life. She had been alone. She had believed that strength came from distance, from cold authority, from power forged in fear. But this child, this tiny human, had shown her something else. Strength could come from closeness, from trust, from a simple hug that her species had never understood. Her people watched silently as the human flagship sent down a landing vessel. It descended slowly, cautiously, as though afraid to break the fragile peace that had formed in the Queen's arms. The Queen stepped forward to meet it. Her soldiers parted like a shadow splitting under sunlight. She walked with dignity, each movement marking the shift of an entire civilization. The human landing craft touched the ground. Its doors opened with a hiss. Human medics rushed out, followed by a group of officers. Their faces held both terror and hope. The Queen bent down and gently placed the child into their arms. But when she tried to pull away, the child reached back toward her, wanting one last embrace. And she gave it. In that moment, the galaxy changed. Her people saw it. The humans saw it. And history would remember it. A queen feared across the stars, hugging a human child as if she were no longer a weapon but a guardian. When the child finally let go, he touched her face with his tiny hands, leaving behind invisible marks that no one could erase. The humans bowed to her. Her own soldiers bowed too, not in fear, but in respect. The human fleet prepared to leave, the child safely aboard. The Queen watched the ships rise through the sky, their engines glowing softly like lanterns drifting into space. Her world would rebuild. Her people would learn, and she, once feared by all, would be remembered not for war but for ending one. As the final ship vanished into the stars, the Queen whispered a silent promise inside her heart. This peace would last, even if she had to protect it alone.